Hey, what's going on? Welcome into the Huddle Up Podcast. I am your host, Taylor Sharp. Look, on this podcast, we're going to cover all things NFL, whether it's injury reactions, trades, live game reaction, all of it. We're going to cover it right here. So welcome into the very first episode of the Huddle Up Podcast. I, of course, am your host, Taylor Sharp. I want to hit two topics today as kind of our opening to this podcast as a whole. And if you saw the news about the San Francisco 49ers, you know that it kind of just got bad from worse, really from the start of the season up until now. They finally got Christian McCaffrey back a few weeks ago. I mean, you guys remember it was his Achilles in one foot, and then it kind of started, hey, there's an Achilles in his other leg that's giving him problems. He was out for the first 10 weeks of the season. Well, he came back. He played 3 games, and in 2 of the 3 games, he had over 100 yards from scrimmage. You're like, okay, same old Christian McCaffrey. No problem there whatsoever. Well, he left the game. It was the snowy game against the Buffalo Bills that we all saw on Sunday night. He has now been placed on injured reserve with a knee injury. No word yet on the severity, but at minimum, he's going to be out those 4 weeks. So by all intents and purposes, his season is basically over, at least regular season-wise. Okay, well, Jordan Mason, he's been solid for the 49ers as a backup, right? Although there's only one problem. Jordan Mason yesterday was also placed on injured reserve with an ankle injury. They're going to have to rely on Isaac Guerendo, who has been okay at times. He's been a spotty player here and there. He's never been given the lion's share of carries in really any backfield that he's been in, and now he's going to be the guy in one of the most run-heavy offenses in the NFL. So what you're thinking, well, you know, the 49ers are in trouble. Absolutely, but it's not just McCaffrey and Jordan Mason. Dre Greenlaw missed the game against Buffalo with an Achilles. No word yet on his status. Joe Feliciano, the guard, he missed that game. And then you have a bunch of guys questionable for their upcoming game. Trent Williams, he's questionable. Diamador Lenore, one of the highest paid cornerbacks in the league, he's questionable. Jordan Elliott, Nick Bosa, Aaron Banks. I mean, you get it. They're just riddled with injuries at this point in the season. And you could say that about pretty much every team, right? There's injuries all over the NFL on a variety of different teams, variety of different positions. But it seems like the 49ers have just been bitten by injuries from the beginning of the season till now, and not a whole lot has changed. So I'm here to tell you that the 49ers Super Bowl window might be officially closed. I think we can close that book on the Kyle Shanahan era, at least for right now. They may have to go through a rebuilding process. And look, McCaffrey's not getting any younger. He's 28 years old now. He suffered 2 pretty significant injuries this season. We don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back. It's not just the injuries, though. They dished out a bunch of big contracts because they were in win-now mode. They had one of the most talented rosters, and that's fine as long as they're on the field. Even without McCaffrey and Bosa and all these guys, just look at the contracts they've given out to some of their top players. Deebo Samuel, he ranks top 20 in terms of receiver contracts. They vastly overpaid for Brandon Ayuk in the offseason. You could see that coming from a mile away. Brandon Ayuk's never been that guy, but they were kind of hamstrung. Nobody wanted to trade them at least what they wanted in return for a guy like Brandon Ayuk, so they had to overpay him. Christian McCaffrey, who I just mentioned, has been pretty injured the last season and a half. He's the 3rd highest paid running back in the NFL. Highest paid tight end in the NFL? Well, it's George Kittle, and Kittle's phenomenal. He has 9 touchdowns this season. He's one of the best tight ends in the league. He's been in and out of the lineup really the past 2 seasons. It's kind of hit and miss on when he's going to play on any given Sunday. Trent Williams, their great left tackle, who I mentioned is questionable in this game the next week. He's top 5 at the position in terms of highest paid. Who's the highest paid edge rusher in the NFL? That would be Nick Bosa. Then you have Fred Warner, the leader of the defense. He's the 2nd highest paid linebacker in the NFL. Diamador Lenore, who I just mentioned on the injury report, one of the highest paid corners in the league. You get my point. They have a lot of talent. They have a lot of high price talent, and that's fine as long as you're able to have them on the field and win games. None of those guys are on the field, and they're all within the top 10 to 15 in terms of highest paid at their respective positions. The key with all of these high price contracts has been Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's on a 7th round rookie contract. He's basically making pennies compared to everybody else at his position in the National Football League. And Purdy's been excellent, but that 7th round rookie contract ends after next season. You can't pay everyone, and your stars really aren't getting much younger. And then when you look at the standings of the NFC West, the 49ers are actually at the bottom of it. It's been a really competitive division. You have two teams that are 6-6. The Seahawks sit at the top of that at 7-5, and then 5-7, the San Francisco 49ers. So they're 5-7. Again, fourth in the NFC West. The playoffs are a long shot at this point. No McCaffrey, no Jordan Mason for basically the entirety of the regular season that is remaining. Bosa's been in and out of the lineup. Kittle's been in and out of the lineup. No Brandon Ayuk. He's basically hasn't played the entire season. Now, Juwan Jennings has been one of their most consistent players, and ironically, he's not very high paid, but how long until he demands a new contract? And you know the success that Brock Purdy's had and the high level of play that he's had in San Francisco. He's going to get one of these top dollar contracts as well. You can't pay everybody, and they're going to pay Brock Purdy. Quarterback always is a priority for every single team. So what does that mean? You're going to have to get rid of some of these guys. Is it a Fred Warner? Is it a Lenore? Is it a Trent Williams? He's getting up there in age. Do you move on from Deebo Samuel and kind of ride this thing out with Juwan Jennings, and then you got to keep Brandon Ayuk? You're kind of hamstrung to him because of the high contract you gave him. So they're 5-7 right now. They're injured to all hell, and there's really no clear path for them to get any better. Players are getting older. They have big contracts, and the quarterback on the rookie deal, which has really been bailing you out of your cap space because he makes so little amount of money, is about to get paid pretty soon as well. It might be safe to say that the 49ers Super Bowl window is officially closed. That was kind of the first topic I wanted to hit on in this opening podcast. And before we get out of here, though, I do want to mention one more thing. I want to hit on one more topic for you guys, because anybody that follows the NFL closely, you watch the NFL draft, right? It was all about the quarterbacks. I mean, 1, 2, and 3, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. I'm going to talk about two of those three guys right now. When you're looking at a rookie of the year race, right? This is, you're 2/3 of the way through the season. This is kind of the time where we start talking about, hey, who are going to be the favorites for the rookie of the year? The guy that I want to start with is actually not one of those top 3 quarterbacks, but he went in the first round nonetheless. I want to look at Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix has been a godsend to that offense. And, it's one of those players that people kind of had mixed opinions of. Hey, he wasn't asked to do a ton at Oregon. That offense was a bunch of short passes. But when you looked at possible suitors for Bo Nix, what did everyone say? Well, Sean Payton. Sean Payton thrives on the short passing game. Drew Brees did that for a number of years. Brees was an excellent quarterback, and he won a ton of games. He didn't have the biggest arm in the world, but he didn't need it because the Sean Payton offense had that short to intermediate passing game, and he was lethal there. So far, Bo Nix has done the same. He obviously had his growing pains, but, look, Bo Nix's numbers speak for themselves. Basically, 64% completion percentage, 2,842 yards, 17 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He also has another 300 yards rushing on the ground and 4 touchdowns. Probably the most underrated part of his game coming into the league was his ability to run the football. And we saw it at 2 different spots. People just didn't pick up on it. We saw it at Auburn and Oregon. Bo Nix is very much a dual-threat quarterback. Now, he's a pass-first guy. He's not a guy that's going to run it 20 times a game, but when he has to take off and make things happen with his legs, usually good things happen if you're the team that Bo Nix plays for. Second guy I want to look at is Jaden Daniels. 69.6% completion percentage for the Washington Commanders. Again, like Bo Nix, a little over 2,800 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So 2 less touchdown passes than Nix, but also 2 less interceptions. 590 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. So a little bit less in passing than Bo Nix has done, but he's done more on the ground than a Bo Nix. I think we're splitting hairs with these two guys at this point. The Broncos are on the verge of the playoffs. You could say the same thing about the Washington Commanders. So these are two quarterbacks that have had a lot of individual success this year, and their team success has certainly followed along the way. The guy that everyone thought was going to be the overwhelming favorite for this award is, of course, Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick for the Chicago Bears. Caleb's had his moments. I think he struggled a lot more than Nix and Daniels. 61% completion, 2,600 yards, 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That's not bad. His rushing numbers is really where he gets in trouble. Now, he has more rushing yards by about 50 or so over Bo Nix. Bo Nix, 4 rushing touchdowns. Caleb Williams, no rushing touchdowns. He's a little bit behind there also. Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels, they've stepped up in crunch time, in the clutch, if you will, when their teams have needed it the most. When you go look at Caleb Williams game by game, in the biggest games, he's kind of faltered a little bit. He's shown those rookie mistakes that are going to come out. Everybody goes through it, but Daniels and Nix have just looked more polished. And, you might push back on that and say, okay, well, Caleb Williams has struggled in the biggest moments. Go look at his stat sheet from the Lions game. I understand that, but he was terrible in the first half. The Lions let their foot off the gas a little bit when they thought that game was in hand. Now, it almost came back to bite them because the Bears made that a game in the second half. But Caleb Williams, less than 100 yards passing in the first half of that football game. It was virtually all done in the second half. He struggled in big moments. So when you look at quarterbacks, I think Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels neck and neck right now for Rookie of the Year. I don't even know which way I would lean. I mean, again, their games are similar, their team records are similar, and their overall stats really, really similar at this point in the year. But I don't think it's just those two guys. And I get it. Rookie of the Year, NFL MVP, it almost always goes to a quarterback. And you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, well, no running backs have really broken out. I mean, Tyrone Tracy's been good, but has he been MVP worthy? Probably not. No to Malik Neighbors, no to Marvin Harrison Jr. Their quarterback situations are too bad. What about a tight end, though? What about Brock Bowers? Look, we all knew the talent that Brock Bowers was coming out of Georgia, right? I mean, there were a lot of people that were like, hey, if the Heisman truly goes to the best player in college football, this guy right here might actually be that player. He is on pace right now for over 1,000 yards receiving as a tight end in his rookie year. That is excellent. Where does Brock Bowers currently sit? 84 receptions, 884 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I mean, that's good for a normal tight end on a full season. He's still got about 4 games left. There are 3 players in the NFL that have more receiving yards than Brock Bowers. Not tight ends, players, period. Tight end, receiver, running back, there are 3 players. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, shout out to the LSU boys, and Terry McLaurin. That's it. All 3 of those guys are Pro Bowl caliber receivers. They all play in really good offensive systems, and they've all been there, done that. That's it. Brock Bowers ranks 4th in the NFL in total receiving yards. Pair that with 4 touchdowns. I mean, Bowers is on pace right now for 1,000 yards, around 6 or 7 touchdowns. That's Pro Bowl worthy as a rookie. And I get it. Again, going back to the quarterbacks, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, they're going to come through for their team in a lot of big moments. You look at the box scores, some of these Raiders games, it's Brock Bowers and everybody else. I mean, Bowers is getting 12 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown. The next closest guy will be like 3 catches for 25 yards. To add even more impressiveness to that, he's done it with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as his quarterbacks. And virtually no running game to fall back on. Everyone was excited about Zamir White coming into the year. He has been a non-factor. He's basically riding the bench the last 6 or 7 weeks. Amir Abdullah has taken over that backfield. Alexander Madison has taken over that backfield. And those are kind of your 2 guys. Now, Madison and Abdullah, they're fine. They're solid players. But with Alexander Madison as your leading rusher, does that really inspire a lot of confidence? Does that strike fear in the hearts of opposing defenses? No. So you don't have to worry about the run if you're an opposing defense. You don't really have to worry about any weapons on the outside. I mean, Jacoby Myers shows flashes, but that's it. And the next best receiver outside of Jacoby Myers might be Trey Tucker, who I guarantee you none of us heard of before this season. So there's no threat in the running game. There's no threats in the passing game outside of Brock Bowers. And he has atrocious quarterback play. All the focus is on him defensive-wise if you're game planning for the Las Vegas Raiders, and he's still putting up those numbers. So I get it. Quarterbacks have dominated this award, and Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels are both perfectly worthy of winning this award. I would be fine if either of them did. But keep your eye on Brock Bowers because he might just be the most important piece to his team as far as this rookie class. All right, let's going to put a button on the first ever episode of the Huddle Up Podcast. We're going to try to make this a daily thing, definitely weekly. And look, again, we're going to dive into all things. Rookie of the Year race. We'll talk about that as the season goes along. Playoff standings. Who could challenge the Chiefs as Super Bowl winners? We'll look at playoff seeding. We'll do game reactions, all of that. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope you tune in more for the next episode of the Huddle Up Podcast.